April, we have the pleasure to have Rachel Pretlow, the Community Engagement Manager of the Autism Society of Central Virginia, along here with the support of her colleague Ian. We're so grateful to have you here. And she's going to help raise our consciousness about autism awareness as we remain committed to engaging our community members with dignity and respect. And as Bishop Moore mentioned, that we are on the road to really becoming an inclusive community. And so because of that, autism awareness is a priority. Amen? Amen. And so as we continue to create inclusive communities, I want to share a little bit more about our presenter, Rachel Pretlow. She has been a member of the Autism Society of Central Virginia since 2020 and is currently the co-chair of their Self-Advocate Council. As a community educator, she is focused on expanding and enhancing their educational programming by supporting the development, implementation, and evaluation of community trainings. She also assists with the execution of tasks associated with grant-funded programs and initiatives. Rachel has experience in habitat restoration, farming, education, and positive youth development. She is passionate about cultural preservation and indigenous healing modalities. Rachel holds a Master of Health Science degree from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She enjoys exploring swinging, dancing, and making traditional crafts. Today's presentation will provide us with foundational definitions and information about autism, identify common characteristics of people with autism, challenge myths and misconceptions about autism, and discuss strategies for allying with the autism community. Rachel lends her experience as an autistic adult to this training, so we will leave with a better understanding of the strengths, the needs, and the experiences of autistic individuals in their community. So without further ado, would you please join me in welcoming Rachel Pretlow.
Okay, we'll try without it. Okay, sounds good. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, God is good. Oh my gosh, I was feeling that music. Gotta say, it's my first time I've done a training where I felt the Spirit of God in the room. But yes, so thank you so much for that praise and worship before we got started here. So yes, again, my name is Rachel Pretlow. I'm very happy that you all have chosen to be here today to learn more about how we can be more loving people to everybody in our community. So let's go ahead and get started with do I need to have a little? And then again, I'm really pleased to have one of my colleagues and a co-member of the Self-Advocate Council, Ian, here with me today. So we both are going to be able to offer our perspectives as autistic adults, to help you all with some increase in your understanding of what the autistic experience is like. Given the size, of the group, feel free to ask questions as we go along, but there will be some time at the end as well for you all to be able to ask some questions. All right. All right, there we go. All right, so our Autism 101 training is our intro, basics of autism training. So yeah, go ahead to the next slide. All right, so an overview of the presentation that we have today. We're going to start out with going over a little bit of information about the Autism Society of Central Virginia, or ASCV. Then we're going to look into what autism is, just the basics. And then we're gonna see what actually is the autistic experience like. So we're gonna go over primary characteristics of autism. Then we're going to move into some strategies for being an ally, or how to interact with autistic individuals in different spaces. And then I'll leave you all with some resources as well at the end. But before we move on, does anybody need me to use the mic?
Yes, for the live stream.
For the live stream? Okay. All right. Is that better?
Turn it on. There we go.
How about now?
Yes.
All right. All right, let's get in. So about the Autism Society of Central Virginia, for over 40 years, the ASCV has served as one of Central Virginia's premier sources of education, advocacy, services, and support for individuals with autism, our families and friends, and professionals. So the organization started in the 70s as a group of moms who really did not have the information at that time or the support that they needed to help their kids. In the 70s, we didn't have Google yet. We didn't really have cell phones yet. And so a lot of, families who had children who were diagnosed with autism were in their own, isolated experiences. But these parents knew that they needed that, to do better for their kids. And so they got together and they came together to help each other and also other families with autistic children by doing the same things that we do today. We educate the community, like I'm doing here today, advocate for services and supports, including at the state level, like going to the state capitol, and provide programs where autistic people of all ages and our loved ones can feel safe and welcome. And, from our small beginnings back in the 1970s to now, last year, out of over 70 Autism Society chapters around the country, our Autism Society of Central Virginia was chosen as the affiliate of the year. So you all have some really, great resources here with the Autism Society here in Richmond. All right, so some of those services and supports that we offer are social and recreational activities, again, for all ages. So we have different social groups for different ages. We have some social groups for elementary, teen groups, as well as adult groups, both in person and online, for those folks who are further away from Richmond or who feel more comfortable engaging from, their home spaces. We also have family and caregiver support groups, and so those include support groups for siblings of autistic youth, because oftentimes, in their experience with growing up with an autistic sibling, they kind of, can get overlooked, or, they may not get as much personalized attention. And so we bring the siblings together to have their own support group. We have support groups for parents in general, for mom. We have our own mom group, a dad group. We have a grandparents group. And so, yes, there is your grandparent. Yes. So we have something, really for everybody in the family. We also offer educational workshops, and so that is the Autism 101, like we're doing today. We have specific workplace training as well, so getting different employers trained and ready to be able to offer employment to autistic individuals. I'll highlight a program that we have because I'm the manager of that program, Autism Friendly Communities. This is a program where we offer more specialized training and services for different businesses that want to increase their inclusion and accessibility in their business practices. And so we do, basic autism, intro to autism training, and then based on the location, we'll do more specialized training and resource development. So for example, I'm currently working with a pediatric urgent care facility, designing specialized resources for them to be able to assist the patients who come in to the clinic. We also do information and referral services, and so we get lots of questions, from folks throughout the community about how they can connect their loved ones to resources and services and different things. And so, if you can think it, we've been asked it, and we have folks who are dedicated to answering those questions, including Ian, as a part of his job with the Autism Society. Get lots of questions. We also offer scholarships and financial assistance programs. So this is extremely important in the services that we provide. We want everybody to be able to access our services regardless of personal income. And so we offer transportation scholarships, because transportation is a big barrier to getting services and supports in the community. We also offer membership scholarships, so folks who want to get access to more programs and services through membership. We offset the costs through different grants that we apply for. And then we also have advocacy initiatives. So every January, we go to the state capitol and advocate for different services and supports for folks with developmental disabilities. All right, so now we're going to look into what is autism. And before we go into the details of that, I just have a question actually for y'all. So how many of you actually know somebody who has autism? All right, welcome. Thank you for being here. All right, so I think I saw everybody's hand raised in this room. I mean, at this point, autism is very common, so I'm not surprised, to see everybody's hand raised. So when you all think about the autistic loved ones in your lives, or the people who you know who are autistic, what are some things that come to mind about those individuals?
Lack of eye contact.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is a common characteristic, definitely. Yeah, what else?
Not following commands. So my grandson is 4, and it takes a lot to get his attention.
Yes, definitely. So a short attention span, or needing to have a lot of energy to direct somebody is yes, very common with autistic individuals. Stimming, yes. Do you want to say anything else about that?
I don't know much, but I know that it's oftentimes, while it is, from what I understand, it's something that's helpful to help with stimulation or dysregulation, but at the same time, it can be very, there's a lot of stigma around stimming, and it makes people who are autistic and need to stim, they feel uncomfortable doing it because of the stigma around it.
Yes, and thank you, for saying that. We will be going more in depth into stemming later on, but I mean, everybody stems. I have this up here with me now so that I can be stemming while I'm going through the presentation. So we'll definitely go into that. I want to say welcome to the folks who are just now entering. We're getting more people here in this room. Praise God for that. All right, so let's go on to the next slide, and you can skip that one as well. You can go ahead and skip that one, since we just did that one. Okay, so autism is a lifelong developmental disability. It is a brain difference that impacts the way a person communicates, the way that we sense the world, so our sensory perception, and also how we move our bodies. So stimming is one of those differences that many autistic people experience. So current numbers indicate that 1 in 36 children in the United States are diagnosed as autistic. That is up from 1 in 44 last year, which was up from 1 in 68 the year before, which was up from 1 in 250 a few years before that. And so diagnosis rates are steadily increasing, and this is mainly because of what we're doing right now. Increasing awareness of autism in our communities and increasing understanding, and also reducing stigma so that more people can feel comfortable with doing what is best for their child and saying, oh, I don't think, this is exactly right. Maybe we should go and get that checked out. The recent increase in diagnosis is most evident in the increased diagnosis rates in Black children and other children of color. So
since the diagnosis criteria for autism were based on white boys of middle and upper income, that was the only people who were being diagnosed with autism for a long time. But more understanding has been happening all around the country to realize that autism affects everybody, every race, every culture, every socioeconomic status. And I'm so grateful that people are beginning to see, our children as not bad kids, but as just having some more, needs based on how our brains work differently. Autism, as it is currently diagnosed, is 4 times more prevalent in boys than it is in girls. That may not be the actual truth, but again, because the diagnosis criteria was based on studies of boys, people are just looking mainly for the characteristics of what boys are doing. So oftentimes, girls, women, or folks who don't identify as either get overlooked for a diagnosis, or they will get diagnosed with something else, like a mental illness. I was diagnosed officially last year. I've known I'm autistic since I was 18, but I was officially diagnosed last year. I know with a lot of Black women, that is very common to be diagnosed later in life. And so in the autism community, self-diagnosis is completely valid. We understand that not everybody wants to get a diagnosis. Not everybody is able to access a diagnosis financially or the resources that are available in their local community. And so if folks just want social access to programming, if they want to get connected to services and supports, we do not require anybody to show us a paper, diagnosis paper, in order to get them connected to supports and services. Well, also, autism does look different across the different genders. One way that it looks different, for example, in folks who are socialized as girls is in what is called masking or camouflaging. Girls are socialized to be friendly, to be more outgoing. And so even if they are autistic, and that's not their, our nature, because we are socialized in that way, it can mask our true nature, and it can lead to a person not being diagnosed at all, or to a person being diagnosed later. Or, masking is very draining. It's very detrimental to mental health, and so a person may also be diagnosed with different mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, different things, because they are suppressing their true nature. And then again, autism is seen across all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. We are still seeing differences in evaluation, diagnosis, and supports and services. But as time goes on, these gaps are being closed, and more of our kids are being diagnosed and connected to different supports and services. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide. Thank you for taking the pictures, by the way, and for multitasking. I really appreciate you, Philip. All right, so autism is a spectrum disorder, and that means that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Each autistic individual, like every other individual, is their own unique person. Autism as a neurotype affects the different areas of the brain, including language, motor skills, sensory, perception of the world, and executive functioning, which is like the planning and completion of tasks. So while many people think that the autism spectrum looks like the line on the left-hand side, with less autistic people being on one end of that line and more autistic people being on the other end of that line, that is a completely inaccurate portrayal of the autistic experience. It actually looks more like the image on the right, where each person's brain is affected in those areas of language, motor skills, etc., in different ways. And so each autistic person ends up with their own kind of unique color palette of what is their autistic experience. All right, so in talking about autism, there are a few key areas of conversation that we need to go over. And one of those areas is using person-first language or identity-first language. Person-first language presents a person's personhood before their diagnosis. So that is saying person with autism. So it kind of presents the notion that the autism is separate from the individual. Then we have identity-first language, which puts the neurotype first or before personhood. So that is saying autistic person or just saying autistic. And so, of course, everybody has their own individual preferences, but for the most part, autistic individuals themselves show a preference for identity-first language. So that is saying autistic. And not even needing to put person there, because of course we're people. Why do we need to highlight that? So it kind of highlights that the way that our brains think is very integral to our identity as a whole. Just like, with our race or culture, I don't go around saying I'm a person with blackness. I'm a black person, or I'm just black. So neurotype is kind of viewed in the same way for many people who are autistic. But again, if you have any doubts about that, ask each individual, because some people, do prefer other ways of identifying themselves. There's also been a move in recent years away from functioning labels and towards using more supports needs language. And so functioning labels have been used for decades, and they really correspond to that inaccurate linear view of autism, where less autistic people would be called high functioning, or what was formerly called Asperger's. That's no longer a diagnosis. It's all autism spectrum disorder. And then people on the other end of that line, who would be considered more autistic, would be called, having low functioning autism, or just low functioning, or having a pervasive autism. And so there are many issues with this. Usually functioning labels are associated with a person's ability to speak, and how people perceive a person's ability to speak or inability, and how they connect that to a person's cognitive capacity. So typically, a person who, like me, is able to speak, fluently. I'm able to express myself on most days and most moments by using my spoken voice. I would be considered, a person who is high functioning. Whereas a person who is unable to speak or is not able to speak, consistently to express themselves, would be considered low functioning. But speaking does not have anything to do with a person's cognitive capacity. There are some people who can speak fluently, like me, but need 24/7 supports. There are some people who cannot speak at all and are able to live by themselves, live independently, go to work every day. And so that is why we have moved from functioning labels, which also are just detrimental to a person's well-being. Think about if somebody called you low functioning all the time, without thinking that you even hear them, how would that make you feel? So we are moving away from functioning labels to supports needs language. So that is, more specifically identifying where a person's strengths are and where they need a little bit more support. And so an example of that could be, somebody requires substantial support to engage in unstructured recreational activities, but they require minimal support to engage in academic work. So the goal in our community is to connect people with good services and supports, and by using supports needs language, we are moving more towards that goal. There's also a conversation around the symbols to use to represent autism. For many years, the puzzle piece has been the symbol to represent autism. It is a symbol that is associated with the biggest autistic organization, Autism Speaks. And for the most part, autistic individuals have expressed a dissatisfaction with that as a symbol because it tends to kind of evoke thoughts of autistic people being a mystery, being puzzling in and of ourselves, or even the association of puzzle pieces with childhood, where autism is a lifelong experience. And so many autistic people or autistic people have moved more towards using the infinity symbol. So that is what is here on the image, that 8 that is on its side. So many autistic self-advocates, that's another word for autistic people, have expressed a preference of using that symbol and moving away from the puzzle piece as a symbol for autism. On the child's shirt, there's that 8. Usually you'll see it laying on its side, and so it'll look like a horizontal 8. That's the infinity symbol for autism. Mm-hmm. All right, and then a couple of phrases that I hear folks from time to time use about autism that I would like to point out include, everyone is a little autistic. That's false. I think a lot of times people try to do that to express some sort of empathy with an autistic person. However, autism is not a deficit. So, there are other ways of expressing connection with autistic people than lying and saying everyone is a little autistic. Kind of primary challenges that autistic people face are very similar to the challenges that everybody else faces. However, it's a difference of degree of challenges where not everybody needs to have an aide, in the classroom. Not everybody needs to have staff who are coming to, help them take medications and different things. And so we definitely want to move away, from phrases like that. And then also, but you don't look autistic. What does autism look like? Autism does not have any particular physical traits that comes along with it. While certain behavioral characteristics can be obvious, there is no physical marker of autism. So you cannot just look at somebody and tell that they are autistic. So we definitely want to move away from phrases like that as well. All right, and now the characteristics. They're typically present before the age of 3, even if somebody gets diagnosed later in life or not at all. So there are often co-occurring medical and psychological conditions that autistic people face. So those can include auditory processing disorder, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, or other tic disorders, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, epilepsy or other seizure disorders, and many other things. Now, while psychological conditions are often co-occurring with autism, like depression, anxiety, autism itself is not a mental illness. It is a developmental disability. We currently do not know what causes autism. However, it is very likely a combination of both genetic and environmental factors. And therapies are going to be designed on the individualized level to support skill development. Since each person is affected in a different way, therapies are designed for each person individually to help them get supports wherever they need. And I'll also just point out, with me using the word therapy, supports, services, I'm not using the word treatment. Autism is not a disease to be treated. It is a lifelong condition where people just need to learn how to be their best selves by going through different therapies if needed to help them, gain some different skills for living their best lives. Okay, so we did a little basic intro of what autism is, and now we're going to go over some primary characteristics to see what autism is actually about. All right, so we're going to start out with the social communication and interaction characteristics. And I will start out with strengths in each of these areas. We want to highlight, a person's strengths before we highlight their challenges. So some strengths that autistic folks can have in this area include thinking independently, which is something that I think the world needs a lot more of these days. Direct communication, both in how a person communicates and how they receive information very directly. Along with that, honesty and reliability. Autistic people will tell you like it is, even if it hurts your feelings. And I think that that is a beautiful thing. You do not have to guess, what autistic people think. They're gonna tell you like it is with words or not. And then also, many autistic folks are really good at working independently. Now, some social differences that you all may notice with autistic people is differences in developing and maintaining relationships. A lot of times the challenges come with the maintenance side of relationships because, of course, relationships are very tricky. They're very nuanced. They're not logical all the time. You cannot put a relationship into a formula. And so oftentimes autistic individuals just need a little bit more support or facilitation with maintaining friendships or relationships within the family or in the workplace as well. Many autistics may not show anticipatory behaviors, and this means, not being able to tell what is going to happen next or what consequences might be to certain actions. You may not see shared enjoyment or interests with others. And you also, with autistic folks, they might not display shared interests through joint attention. And so that means if somebody is interested in an object or in an activity, autistic folks may not take you to share that activity with you. Now, we have stars, little asterisks next to show, see, and display. And that is because we want to highlight that because autistic people's brains work differently, how certain behaviors display themselves are going to look different from what many people are expecting them to look. So, autistic people are humans. We are all social creatures. Many people desire, crave friendships and relationships with people. However, if people see somebody on their own, playing off on their own by the side, they may think that that person just wants to be by themselves. But it may be that their communication differences are not allowing them to engage in ways that are typically expected of that person. And so I think it's just really good to remember that when a person's brain works differently, you have to let go of your expectations of what different behaviors are going to look like. How many of you have heard the statement, autistic people don't have empathy? I'm happy that no hands went up. This was a myth that was going on for a while. It was being perpetuated in different news cycles for a long time. And I think it's a dangerous assumption to have. It created perceptions of autistic people being heartless or not caring about people. I remember there was some shooting that happened, and what was being highlighted in the media was this was a person with Asperger's, and so this is why this person, did. Is that okay? We're good. Yeah, so that was why the person committed that crime. However, that is absolutely a myth. So many autistic people actually highlight that they experience such high levels of empathy that, if somebody is sad, they feel the pain all throughout their bodies. And so empathy is, autistic people do feel empathy, but where we may have delays or challenges is with guessing how somebody is feeling, especially if somebody does not say how they are feeling explicitly. Like a lot of people just say, oh, I'm fine, when they're not fine. How are you supposed to know if a person's not fine, when they're saying that they're fine? So yes, it can be hard to guess how somebody is feeling. It's hard to read different facial expressions or body language to tell how somebody is feeling. There may also be some challenges with taking another person's perspective and also understanding or being able to adhere to unspoken social rules. So that could mean not really knowing what to do if somebody feels sad or if somebody feels upset. It may mean not understanding that the expectation when you are in church is to be quiet. Or it may not, or people may have trouble understanding that if you are in class, you are supposed to stay seated. And so, many of these things that are taken as givens socially often need to be taught step by step to autistic individuals. And I think it's also important to highlight that empathy goes both ways. When autistic people are with other autistic people, often there are no issues. Communication is fine. We understand how each other are feeling because it's more explicit. When non-autistic people are with other non-autistic people, there tends to be more understanding than when non-autistic people are with autistic people. Usually when non-autistics are with non-autistics, the problems are always put on the autistic person, even though there are two people in the situation who are not understanding each other. So I think that there needs to be some grace and some patience given to autistic people because we're not the problem. All right, some communication differences that autistic folks experiences, challenges with using or interpreting nonverbal behaviors. And so you mentioned the eye gaze, so not having consistent eye contact. It can also include not really understanding what gestures mean. So you may point at something, but the autistic person may not be, interpreting your pointing at something, as a communication. And then other forms of body language too. There can be just some misunderstandings. Autistic folks can have very limited facial expressions, so you may just have a blank face all the time, or they may have even very exaggerated facial expressions that just may not seem to fit with the situation at hand. Many autistic folks avoid looking other people in the eye or even looking directly at somebody. Oftentimes this is because of a need to minimize sensory input. Usually when I am first coming into an environment and getting used to an environment, I'm not looking at anybody directly. I'm trying to get myself situated in the space, and so if I look at somebody, that's taking away from the regulation from me being able to regulate myself in the space. So often as well, autistic folks will say, either I can look at somebody in the eye, or I can understand what they are saying. Can't do both. Or I can look at somebody in the eye, or I can express what I want to say. Can't do both. So the eye contact thing is often related to the sensory experience as well. There can often be difficulties with understanding what is not explicitly stated in non-literal language. So many autistic people do not understand jokes or metaphors or sarcasm. So, if you're trying to make, small talk with an autistic person, or if you're trying to make jokes and you're not getting much of a response, don't take that personally. You often just don't know what you're talking about. Don't have the same reference points either for the jokes that you're making. And then many autistic folks have a unique tone of voice when they're speaking, may have their own kind of unique rhythm, when we're speaking. And so I do want to point out that this includes cultural language. Here, in our culture, we have our own unique way of speaking. But autistics often do not match the culture's way of speaking. And so I know when I was growing up, people told me all the time that I was talking white. that I thought I was better than everybody else, that I, was trying to be a white person because I was not able to mimic the way that the other folks in my community were talking. And so, this was another marker of kind of like alienation and isolation, where I felt like, I couldn't really be safe around my own people either. And so, autistic people have their own way of thinking, their own way of speaking as well. All right, so true or false? Most autistic people speak to communicate. So raise your hand if you think that is true. Bless you. All right, raise your hand if you think that is false. All right, let's see. So it is true. Most autistic people do speak to communicate. Only about 1/3 of our population, the autistic community, are believed to be non-speaking or minimally speaking. Can you actually go back to the previous slide for a moment, please? So this young man is Jason Arday. He is an autistic man from Great Britain. He learned how to speak at the age of 11. He is now 37 years old. He is a professor of sociology at Cambridge University. So with autism being a developmental disability, many skills are developed at a later than average age. A lot of times, parents will, just get like really discouraged, if they see that their child, isn't speaking at a young age. I mean, it's true, some folks will not learn to speak, and that is okay. But for other people, for a lot of people, these skills just end up developing at a later than average age. Okay, you can go back to the next one. Thank you. Okay, and then, so again, yes, some people will remain non-speaking, minimally speaking, or just unable to express their ideas accurately through speech. This is what is called apraxia. It's not just with autistic people, it also occurs, with strokes, with traumatic brain injury, and that's where there can be words and ideas in somebody's head, but they're just not able to get those ideas out through their mouth. Speaking is a very complex process. The tongue is involved, the lips are involved, the breath is involved. It's very complex, and so there can be challenges with any or all of those motor functions with autistic people. Also, since many autistic people think visually, or literally like we think in pictures, it can be hard to translate a picture into a word and then get that word out of your mouth, especially if there are lots of other things going on to have to filter out. And so in this photo, actually, I do want to highlight, there is a woman named Tiffany Hammond on social media. She is known as Fidgets and Fries. This is a Black woman from Texas. She is autistic. She has 2 autistic sons, one of whom is non-speaking, and Tiffany just put out her first book called A Day with No Words. It is about her experience with her non-speaking autistic boy. And so, yeah, I want to highlight that Black woman author, autistic woman author, putting out her first book. Okay, so many folks can benefit from assistive augmentative communication, which is abbreviated as AAC. And some of these things include low-tech strategies like pictures, pointing at different pictures, or letter boards. So literally pointing at each letter at a time and having somebody else write down the letter to piece together what that person is saying. You have to have a lot of patience, to do that, the autistic person included. But communication is a birthright, and so if that is a person's way to access communication, that's much better than not having a letter board either. There are other high-tech ways of assistive or AAC devices. So these can include like different things on iPads or tablets. So typing to communicate into voice output devices, or using different programs on iPads that have different words already there for you. So you can press on the word and it can make a sentence for you. I'll highlight as well that even for people who do speak, like myself, we often have times where speaking is just not accessible to us. So, for example, if I am in a new environment, or if I'm in an environment where there's a lot of sensory stimulation, my voice just goes away. And it comes back whenever it wants to come back, or when I have regulated myself enough where my brain can have enough bandwidth to then put towards speaking. Because again, there are lots of steps involved with speaking. So even for speaking autistics, AAC can be very useful, and I do in fact have an AAC app on my phone to help me communicate. After the presentation, you all will be able to come up and interact with the things here on the table, and I do have a visual communication card there on the table as well, where somebody can just point at what they want to express or what they need. All right, we're gonna move into restrictive and repetitive patterning characteristics next. So some strengths in this area include pattern recognition, noticing details that others may miss. So literally being able to find a needle in a haystack, that kind of thing. Memorizing and learning information very quickly. Some people, can tell you what day of the week a date is going to fall on 50 years in the past, 50 years in the future. They can tell you what, movie release date was, for any kinds of movies. So memory is a very common strength in the autism community. There's also a strength of being able to adhere to rules, schedules, and routines. And then also a great long-term memory as well. Then some differences that we may notice with communication is difficulty with back and forth conversation. We've already gone over the source of some of these challenges, but it's also the unpredictability of back and forth conversation that can be challenging. Often autistic people need to have kind of something prepared of what to say, or something prepared of what to do in any given situation. And so often back and forth conversations do not allow for that. And so a person may retreat from back and forth conversation because it can just be too fast to follow, or a person is not able to access that conversation. Many people will use scripting, which is basically like having a preset set of phrases that they will use in order to engage in certain conversation. So this can be like using the same greeting every time, or using kind of the same questions for small talk every time. Because this will give them kind of a sense of order in the situation, so that they can access conversation. Many people also benefit from social stories, and this is where words will be paired with different images to explain to somebody the expectations that are involved in any given situation. Social stories can be designed for anything. There are social stories for what to do when you go to church. There are social stories for what to expect when you go to the doctor. And so it breaks down each step into its own individual step, puts a picture along with that step, and so the person is able to know exactly what the expectations are in those situations. Another common communication difference is echolalia. And so that is where a person may repeat something over and over again. Or somebody may say something like, "Do you want a drink of water?" And the autistic person may say, "Do you want a drink of water?" Or water, water, water. The person may do this because we'll see on the next slide, repetition is often very common. The person may do this because they are using the echolalia as communication. If they're saying water, 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 that may mean that they want that drink of water. So, maybe try getting the water and see if they'll take that water. It may also indicate that a person has not processed what was just said. So it kind of depends on the individual, and you kind of have to get to know that individual. To know if it is serving a function or not. Sometimes autistic people do not have control over the way that our bodies move or what comes out of the mouth too, and so echolalia at times can be
completely meaningless. All right, and so let's get into stimming. It is very common with autistic people to have certain repetitive movements and activities. This is called self-stimulation, and for short, stimming. These, everybody stims. Tapping your foot, bouncing your leg, clicking a pen, all of that, playing with your bracelets, all of that is stimming. And so stimming serves a purpose. It can help people concentrate or focus on the situation. It can help people calm themselves down. That is a huge thing to consider, that if a person is flapping their hands, if they are jumping, if they are spinning, if they are flicking their fingers around their eyes, they are getting the input that they need often to calm themselves down. And so there is a lot of stigma around stimming. There is a lot of stigma in the Black community around stimming. For the most part, I would say if a stim is not causing somebody harm, if the stim is not causing the individual themselves harm, then they need to be able to stim. There are certain stims that can be very big and very loud, and it may not be safe for a Black person to do those stims in a public place, unfortunately. In therapies, certain stims that may be detrimental to the individual can be redirected to other stims that can get the person the input that they need, but be a safer way of moving that will keep them safe. But I'd say that, at home, people need to have a safe space, to be able to release, and stim as needed. So even if it is a behavior that cannot, for safety happen in public, a person should be able to know that it can happen at home. There can often be distress with transitions or changes in routine. So I know this is one thing that I experience a lot. I like to get to wherever I'm going like 30 minutes early so I can just be in the space and have my brain understand that everything is okay in this space before then having the other things happen, like interacting with people and all of that. Many folks will have troubles with going from class to class. Or stopping one activity and going to another activity. So often autistic people just need more time to pause, go to the next thing, pause then, and then go into that to help with the transitions. It's important to note that many autistic individuals elope, wander, or run away. This can often happen if there are unexpected changes that happen that are not okay with that person's brain, and so they just need to leave the situation. Often autistic people will need to have a GPS tracker on the wrist or on the ankle because the elopement risk is real, and so just to be able to identify where that person has gone, and then try to address the reason for elopement later on, like maybe providing pre-warning before a change happens, if the change was the trigger. Along with that, many folks have their own established rituals that must be followed to the smallest detail. If they are not followed, it can be very distressing for that person. Autistic people also tend to focus on small details rather than the big picture. Small details are much easier to comprehend and control than the big picture is. So I think that that's important to remember. And then also many autistic folks have what are called special interests or very deep passions for a certain topic. Some people will talk and talk and talk about that special interest, if you want to hear about it or not. They may, it can also be a very good way of establishing rapport with that person. If you're not finding success in engaging with an autistic individual, you may want to see if they have a particular special interest. Pokemon, Marvel, trains, Hello Kitty, anything. Because if you show that you are interested in what they are interested in, that person may completely open up and their communication may completely change. All right, some sensory differences, and I guess I'll pause here to highlight that the sensory experience is so key to understanding the autistic experience. If you are seeing challenging behaviors or disruptive behaviors arise, it is very likely due to something that the person is sensing in the sensory environment. So for example, if there is a small change in certain aspects of the environment, that can be very distressing for certain autistic individuals. For example, you may go to the AC and turn it down 1 degree. Not a big deal. For many autistic people, that change of 1 degree can feel like a very big change, especially if there was no warning before that change happened. And so wherever possible, before a change happens, you gotta let the autistic person know that so that they can get themselves prepared and you just do what they need to do to handle that change. Many autistic people are also attracted to certain sensory stimuli, so certain tastes, textures, smells, colors, movements, etc. In this image here, we have Danish, who is one of the adult members of the ASCV. Danish always has that rainbow slinky with him. Wherever he goes, he always has it. I was with him yesterday. He was just going back and forth with that slinky for hours and was completely content. So he really likes that particular movement, or even that particular, like the noises that the slinky makes. One way that attractions or to sensory stimuli can manifest is with somebody being a picky eater to the very extreme, where they may only eat cheese pizza. They may only eat one brand of cheese pizza. And so many people will just need some supports in trying to expand their diet palette, because you can't just live off of cheese pizza. So that is something else that can be addressed in therapies.
Question.
Yes.
Is the slinky comparable or similar to stemming?
Yes, it can definitely, be a stem, because it is, a repetitive movement. Doing that over and over again. So I do believe that Danish, uses that for stemming to regulate himself. All right, and we're going to go into the last section of characteristics of autism, which is thinking in pictures, or kind of a catch-all, other characteristics of autistic minds. So some strengths in this area include, again, thinking and learning visually. There are many folks in our community who are amazing visual artists, who are engineers, like things that involve a lot of visual thinking. Autistic people tend to thrive in those. Many people also have unique problem-solving skills. Since our brains are working differently, we are looking at problems and offering solutions that are often very refreshing and very different from what other people are thinking. And then also creative ways of interpreting information from the environment. Okay, some communication differences in this area is a person may be able to recite information, but have challenges with applying that information. So you may ask somebody, do you know what you're supposed to do? And that person may tell you what they're supposed to do, but will they actually do it? Maybe not. Because they know the words that they're supposed to say, but they may not know the actions that go along with those words. So even often very simple tasks need to be practiced and rehearsed over and over and over again for the brain to know what it's supposed to do. Many autistic people have challenges with executive functioning. This includes planning and completing tasks. It includes being able to regulate your emotions It includes having a concept of time. Many autistic people have no concept of time, so they may arrive late consistently for things because they're just not thinking about time in the same way that other people may be. Many autistic people may be very, very organized, have everything in order, but then on the other hand, it may be a mess, going into an autistic person's room because they may not have the skills to know, how to clean up, how to keep things tidy, and different things like that. Many autistic people can also be very impulsive. So, one thing that I mentioned in our first responder trainings is that if somebody is very attracted to shiny things, and if they're interacting with a police officer and see that shiny badge, they may just reach out for that shiny badge because they like shiny things, not thinking about the consequences of that. It's just an impulsive thing. So that is also very common with autistic people. Okay. And then there are also motor differences, the movements of the body that are common in autistic folks as well. For many people, their brains are operating on a different wavelength than the rest of their body. And so they may not be able to direct their body to do the movements that they want the body to do. So many people may seem clumsy, may bump into things a lot, they may trip, they may drop items. Whenever I'm holding something, I have to say, I am holding this object, because otherwise it's just gonna end up on the floor. A reason why I wear this compression sleeve is because it helps me feel like I'm in my body more often. When I take this off, I have a tendency to bump into different things because I just don't have a clear sense of where my body is in space. And so compression can often be helpful for people who have challenges with that. One of kind of the telltale markers of autism at an early age is a child walking on their toes. And this kind of persisting into a later age than what may be expected. Walking on toes in and of itself does not indicate autism. However, in conjunction with other things, it may show that the person is autistic. A person may have messy handwriting or just have challenges with other fine motor skills, like tying shoes or other fine motor things. A person may move very quickly or slowly or kind of like seemingly without control. And then also many people have difficulty with walking long distances. So this young lady, Joy, here in the picture, she has a wheelchair that she's able to walk around, for short distances, but if we have to go longer places, then she'll get in the wheelchair and that's how she gets around. All right, and some more sensory differences. There can be underreactivity or overreactivity to certain sensory stimulation because there are just differences with the filtering and processing of sensory input. Often there can be a backlog in an autistic person's brain where they're trying to process lots and lots of information, and if more information is being put in faster than it's being processed, it can lead to certain challenging behaviors, and I do have a slide on that coming up. Everybody has a different sensory profile. Certain people like to seek certain sensory input, like having loud music, for example. Certain people like to avoid sensory input, like not touching slimy things. Some people can want more sensory input in some areas and want some or less sensory input in other areas. So this may show up as not liking hugs or not liking to cuddle. That tactile input just may be too much. Some people put things in their mouths constantly. So often they'll need like a STEM toy that they can just keep in their mouths so they're not like picking up dirt and putting it in their mouths. Some people may feel nauseous with certain smells. People wear perfume, dress up for their Sunday best, but if they don't like that perfume, it may be a very strong reaction to that smell. Or some people may even need certain sensory input before they can engage in a certain task. So some people may need to jump around or go on a swing before they're able to do classwork. Another sensory difference that is not particular to autism, but many autistic people, including myself, experience this, is synesthesia. This is where two senses are connected in a way. So some people may hear music and see colors, or they may see light and hear a certain sound. For me, if I see somebody touched, I feel that touch, like all over my body. And so that also can go into making a situation like overwhelming very quickly if there are multiple sensory, like just a lot of input going on. All right, and I do want to touch on sensory overload because this is a big deal with autistic individuals. So everything that we experience goes into our overwhelm bucket. So that can include our social interactions, our sensory environment, certain tasks and transitions that we have during the day. But there are other ways to release from the bucket, like being able to stim or being able to have some time alone. But if more things are being put in that bucket faster than things are able to release from the bucket, then people, especially if they are sensory avoiders, are likely going to experience sensory overload, which may look like being unable to sit still, crying, screaming, not listening, putting their hands over their ears, trying to leave, running away, or having a meltdown or a shutdown. So many of these things can look like misbehavior, and oftentimes they are treated as if they are misbehavior through discipline. However, discipline in situations of sensory overload is going to make the situation much worse because it's adding even more input and it's making the person feel bad about their experience when they're already feeling bad. So I think especially in our community where we have certain behavioral standards, we have to slow down and see, is this sensory overload or is this child actually, or this adult, is this person actually misbehaving? All right, another true or false. True or false, autistic children and adults tend to have more temper tantrums than non-autistics. So raise your hand if you think that is true. More temper tantrums. All right, raise your hand if you think that's false. Okay, let's see. So the falses have it. Autistic people do not have more temper tantrums than non-autistics. Tantrums have a goal. They have a time limit. They need attention. They can be regulated. Often with autistic people, we're not experiencing temper tantrums, we're experiencing meltdowns where there is no goal. It is not communication. There is an overload of some sort happening, be that a sensory overload, an emotional overload, or a social overload, just having too many social demands in a day. It can have an unlimited time frame. No sort of discipline or coddling is going to make this go away. It needs time. They can both look the same. They can both include kicking and throwing and spitting and self-harming behaviors, but often autistic folks are having a meltdown rather than a tantrum.
Question.
Yes.
What if so again, my grandson, he's a toddler, but he acts like that when he wants something and we tell him no. And then he ends up getting it, and because we want him to calm down. So, I mean, I would think that's when it happens too. Yeah.
I think autistic people do experience tantrums. So that sounds to me like that's a tantrum. It's not always going to be a tantrum, but I mean, yeah, autistic folks are going to experience tantrums too. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that one. And then if a situation has gotten to the point where it is just too overwhelming, it may lead to a shutdown where, again, there is no goal. This person cannot have any more input happening. They are unresponsive. They are still. They might be underneath a chair. They may have run away. They're unable to think, move, or respond. And again, this has an unlimited time frame. So the response to these for both of them is going to be patience, minimizing that sensory input, calm, dark, quiet place. Compassion as well, since this is something that is out of the individual's control, and then asking beforehand what the person needs for support. But often, again, it is just alone time and quiet, and waiting for that person to get through it, and not adding in other sensory input or demands. All right, so we're gonna finish out here with some allying strategies. So one way to be an ally is to create safe spaces for autistic people and their loved ones to feel welcome. So that's part of what y'all are doing here today. So some ways that you can do that are with building a sensory-friendly environment in whatever space that you are in. Sensory-friendly environments include reducing visual distractions whenever possible, reducing any unnecessary noise, so kind of keeping it quiet in the environment, making space for and encouraging movement, since folks often need that to regulate themselves, really encouraging people to do that. Providing a variety of seating options, so having some cushions around, or having like harder seating options available, or even having like rocking chairs available so that a person can be in a space and moving, getting their needs met. Having a variety of activities and different opportunities for learning, not having everything, for example, be showcasing fine motor skills, since many people struggle with that, not having everything be a discussion, since many people would not be able to access that. And then just in general, creating a quiet area, a place for people to be able to decompress. Another way that you can be an ally is just setting autistic people up for success. By one, presuming competence. Every person has the ability to learn, think, and understand, no matter if they are making vocalizations, or if they are stemming. So speaking to autistic people like they are people, and people of the age that they are, not speaking to folks like they are children. Again, focusing on strengths and interests, like I have been doing in this presentation, and not just the challenges. Everybody has challenges. Everybody is a work in progress. And so, giving autistic people the grace to be their own works in progress as well. It's important, again, to break tasks down into easy steps and to have clear boundaries and clear expectations, including through the use of visual support tools, like different books, different social stories that can be used to teach people different situations. Helping people to identify their emotions and behaviors, knowing what's okay in different situations, what's not okay, how can we better, express ourselves, rather than, getting angry and things like that. And then allowing for breaks. This is not giving in to somebody. Often people just need breaks to catch up on processing. And so not allowing those breaks may increase challenging behaviors that people are experiencing. So, just making sure that you're being in communication with the autistic individual to see if they're good or if it's time for a pause. All right, some other ways are just to help with establishing routines, having a go-to schedule, that is also visual, having something up on the wall, on the refrigerator for what is going to happen at each part of the day or each part of an activity. Limiting verbal language as much as possible and really honing in on those visual strategies to reduce the person's sensory input and make it able that they're able to engage in the interaction for longer. And then again, giving interventions and strategies time to work. Many autistic people need to repeat things many more times than may be expected for the lesson to sink in. So it's important to be patient for that process. And wherever you can with the caregivers, establishing rapport and open communication with them because they're the advocates for their loved one. They're going to know the things that work and the things that do not work. So you can always consult them where you may need some help. Other ways to be allies are listening to autistic people, whether they speak or not. If you all need input on anything. How to create a sensory-friendly environment, strategies that may work, for engaging autistic folks in the congregation. Reach out to autistic folks, to help out. If you know somebody who is a parent caregiver of an autistic person, consulting adult autistic people and what may work, for helping you raise that child. Respecting autistic people, including respecting our autonomy. I think often with people with disabilities, many decisions are taken away from us, but everybody's their own individual, and everybody should have some element of choice in their lives. And then talking about autism respectfully, it is a difference, it is not a deficit, so we should be talking about it as such. Other ways to be an ally are not making assumptions. So again, this is going back to uplifting autistic voices wherever you can, consulting autistic people on their experiences, partnering with autistic people wherever possible. There's a phrase in our community, nothing about us without us. If there is something that affects autistic people need to be at the table. And then you're gonna make mistakes. I think with every single person, I've been thinking recently, I have to say sorry multiple times a day, and that's a part of the experience, of learning how to be inclusive as well. You're gonna get some things wrong. You may think that an event is sensory friendly, and it turns out that it's not. So just giving yourself grace as well to be able to make those mistakes and learn. All right, some ways to stay connected with us. You can go to our website, ascv.org. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. I have some cards there in the back on the table next to the sign-up sheet for the newsletter. If you all need a visual reminder about where to get in contact with us. Again, we have programs for all ages, support groups for all different kinds of people. If you want to volunteer with us, we have plenty of volunteer opportunities. Our kids need to stay engaged, and sometimes we just need extra bodies to play. And so we have different things like that. And then you can, get practice with interacting with autistic folks as well. We have different community events too, including next month we have a 5K and Family Fun Day with different resources at Crump Park. That is on the 20th of May. Our next big event after that is the Duck Race and Festival of Inclusion that we brought back last year, and that is on Browns Island. So you can buy some ducks, put them in the race, and if your ducks win, you could get some pretty cool prizes. A car, $10,000 was the big prize last year. The $10,000. So $5 for a few ducks. And then I'm just leaving you all with some resources here. I have a slide about the different Autism Society affiliates that are around the country. So if you know somebody who may benefit from getting involved with an Autism Society, they're not available in every state, but they are available in most states. And then I have some links here for you all as well, including some specific autism in the Black community resources, if any of that would be of interest to you. All right, that is it. Any questions, please?
First, I want to say thank you to the church for having this event. I decided to bring my son. He was diagnosed with intellectual disability at 2, but autism came at 4. He's my first, so that was a journey for me, and I did make a lot of mistakes. But for me, it's like I'm trying to find balance because of so much of the hardship that I faced early on with people not knowing a lot about it. I ended up becoming overprotective. I've had arguments with family members, and because people just didn't understand, and wasn't a lot of, like you said, resources available. So it's like now, like when I see him, he has a thing where he just likes to walk up to people and get them dap and, fist bump and stuff. And I'll find myself like going like this because I don't want people to misinterpret what he's doing. But people be like, no, he's good. Or we walking down the street and I see a group of kids and I'm like, oh, come on, Joe, let's go. And they be like, what's up, Joe? And I'm surprised because I'm like, oh, okay, wow. But it's like, I don't want to hinder him. But it was like, mama bear. Like, I've been so used to being there and protecting him, but it's like, I don't want to hinder him because he'll be 19 Friday. So I want him to, live a successful and as independent as he can be. But it's like I struggle with that. And the second thing is, I'm wondering how much do the police force get this? Because for me raising him, he's almost taller than me and I'm 6'2". And it's like I have a fear and I struggle with that all the time. And even some of the resources they have in place for us, I call crisis line, they told me to call the police on him. I can't call the police on my son because I already know what's going to happen. If his senses are heightened and he's going to be aggressive, they're not trained, so I know what that's going to lead to, so I couldn't call them. But it's like, what happens, God forbid, if he has an interaction? And like you said, he sees something shiny and he's going for it, and they don't understand why he's going for it. So I'm just wondering, like, how I can, be a part of that solution and helping them becoming more informed.
Yeah, definitely. Very important question there. I'll start out first with addressing a little bit, what you started out with talking about. Even though I wasn't diagnosed officially until last year, I was very much protected by my parents because they could see I was naive. They didn't want me to get hurt. And I think that ultimately, a lot of the issues that I faced when I went away for college and was living independently for the first time, a lot of those things happened because I had been protected so much. It is a very delicate balance, to have, and I think that it's probably more beneficial, to be more protective, than there potentially being a tragedy. So I'd say too, it's never too late. As you get older, you're gonna get more independent. You're gonna have to be able to make your own mistakes too. So, I can't tell somebody how to parent. Your job is to get your kid through every day, and make sure that they stick around. But I'd say, make sure that you connect yourself to safe environments where it is possible for that risk taking to happen, where you can, be a little bit more sure that, he's going to be good, but he's still able to, take those chances and make those mistakes. Because, with folks with disability, there's something called the dignity of risk, where often because of our needs and because of just wanting to protect us, we don't get to make mistakes, or we don't get the same opportunities to mess up and learn from messing up, because I don't know, people view us messing up as different from other people messing up, which sometimes it can be, but for the most part, most people learn by things going wrong. But yeah, I do understand the challenge there. So yeah, wherever those lessons can be learned in a safer environment with people who got his back, I'd say go for those. With the first responders, it's a real challenge. Folks with disabilities overall have a much higher interaction with police and other first responders than the general population. And the training that they get, standard training, is very minimal. it might be like a 2-hour, like intro to all disabilities, and then check off the box, and then next, So, with the Autism Society, we do offer first responders training. Last month, I was at the Metro Richmond Leadership Academy with first responders from all around the state. There were about 80 of them who were there, and we did a more in-depth training, scenarios. One way that I'd say that caregivers and autistic people themselves can get involved is actually volunteering with some of those trainings, because the more that first responders themselves can interact with autistic people, the more that they're going to understand, oh, that's not a threatening behavior. That's just autism, So yeah, I think that is very important. And Ian and I spoke at a symposium a couple weeks ago, where there was one panel on first responders, and I spoke on that panel too. And they said that they need more of that interaction with autistic people, with disabled people, because they don't know what they don't know, basically. And so they talked about caregivers bringing in their loved one with a disability to be to introduce themselves to the force, so that they can interact with the person, kind of get to know what their mannerisms and behaviors and everything are, so that if and when they do have to make a call, that they will have a higher likelihood of understanding and not responding in a violent way. There's also been a push for separating who responds to different incidents. We don't need the police responding to everything, and they don't want to be responding to everything. It takes away resources, and it's also putting them in situations that they know that they are not prepared for. And so in different communities, there are crisis intervention teams where there are mainly mental health professionals or loved ones of people who have mental illnesses or autism or different neurodiversities that are going to respond to a situation because they know how to de-escalate those situations better. So, I'd say it's a work in progress, and the more engagement that we have between the community and between first responders is going to help out. So I know I talked to them about having open houses, so that we can go and interact, and see what a fire truck is like and not be afraid, if that has to, come to our door, that kind of thing. But, don't shy away from, going up to the station and being like, hey, this is me, this is my kid. Please know that we're good. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for being here this evening. I learned so much from this event, and I think knowledge is power. As you talking, as I heard her talking, and this is a reference to the what happened just not recently with the young man being held by the 10 police officers and lost his life. Would it be permissed to suggest maybe, and this is probably something for government or state, but I'm open for correction, that even on your driver's license, if you're not allowed to drive under the influence or DUIs, there's a something when they look up your name, something pops up. Would it be something, could be faceted where if you're diagnosed with autism or any other mental health disease, that could be in the system. Once they run the name in the system, they would know the proper approach to these. Because I am very concerned as well for this young man. Just in happenstance, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. There is actually something that already exists through a law called JP's Law, and that is where you can, a person can go to the DMV. They do have to show proof of a diagnosis, and then they can get designation on the back of the driver's license. For autism and intellectual disability, it's a number 9, and you do have that. Yeah. So that can be a protective factor for people who do not have access to that, or who choose not to do it. There are other things that people can carry around with them. So I keep a laminated card in my wallet at all times that indicates that I'm autistic, and just some like interaction strategies that would be good to like de-escalate a situation. There are also different decals and stickers that you can get to put on a vehicle, to put on the door of your household, so that if a first responder has to come to respond, they can see this. And then they can, change their approach. The police officer that was on that law enforcement panel last week, he basically said that their default in going into situations is kind of assuming the worst. But when they see, something like this, that's when they tailor their response. It can, definitely help, to have that on the driver's license. Or even if somebody does not drive, you can get an ID from the DMV. You can get it for children as well, that indicates that they have an intellectual disability or a developmental disability, so that they can see that as a marker.
Is that something that the faith community can lead and advocate for? Because I think for suggesting that, because I was sitting here thinking about how do we cause community to be autistic friendly. Could there be a sign in the community that says that someone with autism or an autistic family is here? And I learned this yesterday. I sit on the board of Rebuild Together, and we think, your the number on your house, a lot of first responders, because the numbers are not clear, they're not getting service. And one of the things that we had to do is encourage residents to get a new one, and we would provide it, but they didn't want it. So I'm thinking, even if we could advocate for those kind of signs on alongside the numbers on houses, so that first responders would understand in times of emergency.
Yeah, I think that could definitely help. I mean, I know that, I don't know who puts them up, but I mean, I've seen signs like deaf child area. I've also seen autistic child, area signs as well. So that could be something that, if you know of, autistic people living in certain areas of the community, kind of like doing the steps to get that, to get those signs put up. Also, another thing that you could do just with working with caregivers is encouraging them to get on the database for Project Lifesaver. This is a program that many jurisdictions use. Their first responders use this for like if a person has a certain disability, especially like if they are at risk of wandering or running away, you can put the person on that list. So their address comes up, their emergency contact, comes up, certain characteristics of that individual come up, where like if a first responder encounters this person, like if they have gotten away from their caregiver with Project Lifesaver, they do give them like an identification bracelet. They often give them, if the person has a risk of eloping, they give them one of those GPS trackers as well. When they scan the code on that tracker, it pulls up that person's profile. The first responders know where to take them to get them back to safety, to get back to their loved ones. So that's another thing that you could do, just making people aware of that program and helping them to get signed up for that too.
My last question to you in this setting, because you have identified and let us know that you are artistic, what, from your perspective and experience, do we as the church need to do in our worship settings that would help in this conversation?
Ian, would you be willing to speak to that a little bit?
Yes, would you repeat your question, please?
What can we do during the worship experience that would be autistic friendly. I heard you talk about some feeling things and pauses and moments of silence.
Yes, so first and foremost, I want to say that I love these chairs. Purple is very sensory friendly when it comes to autistics. Um, you can also use like less lighting and low volume, because we actually have a monthly event where we would go to the movie theater, and the movie theater would have like a sensory friendly for the autistic children and adults. And it would have like a lower volume, a less lighting. So I would suggest start with those.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And I know Ian is a musician too, and has performed in some big places, and so I know that you're familiar with, different things, with like loud music and stuff. But then the other way that you can help is, I'll start showing you all some of these things here on the table. I mean, making things quieter and dimmer will definitely help. It may not be enough for some people, so then all
with us, you and your colleague. Give me your name one more time. Ian. Yes, so glad to have the both of you with us here. And I mean, only God could do this. I mean, when it came in my spirit, literally, and I was glad that the media didn't take that out, I walk by faith and not by sight. And when it came in my spirit, and I just told Deacon Wilson, I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. I literally watched God do it down to your presence being here, because my heart it's just where you are. I don't want to see somebody who is being normal, being abused. And parents, so many dynamics in this. This is why we got to get back to creating our own community. So when we have our people, we can't be scattered everywhere. We've got to get back to living together and understanding. Because a lot of us, the reason why, when they go over there to their community, everybody in their community know their people. And they ain't coming over there and just going down, shooting everybody and knocking down doors. They coming over there because they are essentially needed and they have relationship. And so you have just helped me. I didn't get your name because names are important to me. Tamika, and your son, Joseph. Amen. Joseph, we are so glad you're here. What a name. God shall add Joseph. Yes, he is going to be 19, or you're going to be 19? 19. Come on, let's thank God. I'm learning. Because we have a tendency to act, and some of this is black culture. You know, parents will, answer for their children because they never let them grow up. So that's just a problem in our community anyway. Nevertheless, I think this moment calls us to an hour of intentionality. One of the things that I kept thinking, and it's one of the points, you can't assume anything about anybody. You have to take the time to learn people. And human beings are always changing. So never assume you know them just because you know them. If you take the time to communicate and ask questions, inquire of one another, then we can identify some life changes. This is the beginning. It is not the end, because I got a whole lot of questions. Now, this is what we're going to do. I am not taking an offering. I'm directing those who are members. If you want to give, you know the means of giving, and anybody that want to share, because we literally did not make this this is not a fundraiser. This is not doing church as usual. And so if those who know that we teach in this house anyway, we are a community of generosity. I'm getting ready to get to a place now where just put the box there, and whoever gives, they just give. Because God takes care. Only God could do what God did. The news media was right there. One day I was at work. She said, "Can you get to my job? I'm running, walking." Thank God I was dressed appropriately. That's why you got to dress for success all the time. And it just happened. Everything just happened. And we want to be a blessing to this new experience, this new journey. This is a new journey for us. And prophetically, this is what we do. Our worship is simply to tear down the barriers that keep people oppressed. and we are not going to do it anymore. Thank God for Bishop Armstrong being here, who is a social worker. You doing that? Yes, he's a social worker by profession. He's here. Amen. His father has been a mentor to me for years. When I was a little child on Hall Street at Harvey's grocery store, his father was there telling me, don't you let the visitation of the Lord leave you. And God has visited us. I'm thankful for everyone. I'm going to give you opportunity to share with our guests, Rachel Pretlow and Ian, and whosoever else. We want to fellowship a little bit, but I'm just going to pronounce a blessing on you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord enlighten you. May the God that's in you be released, that we will become a community that's willing to care and to share as we go along in this life. Go in peace and serve the Lord. God bless you.